Hi, it's Grace from the future. During my recent chat with Pablo about Back to the Future, there was one more thing that I had that could make this film even better. But I decided to cut it from the final video. I thought it might be valuable to share that thing with you today because quite a few people also have this thing. If you missed the discussion I just referenced, I'll leave a link in the description below. For those of you who are already caught up, let's go! There's also an opportunity, because this is another thing that I think there was an opportunity to at least touch on with just maybe a single line of dialogue, and that's the fact that his parents don't remember Marty, which I loved a few years ago. I think it was a few years ago. It might have been a little bit earlier than that, when James Gunn and Chris Pratt had their little feud on Twitter at the time. It's still Twitter. James Gunn said, this is a pretty perfect film, but why don't the parents remember Marty at the end? And Chris quipped back cleverly with, maybe they just remember Calvin Klein and they don't remember Marty.
Well, that is your name, isn't it? Calvin Klein?
But they learned pretty quickly it's Marty. And my other argument to that would be they named their kid Marty.
Marty. Such a nice name.
Clearly, Marty made some kind of impact that Lorraine decided to name her son Marty. There's also the fact that in Act 1 at the dinner scene, she recalls her dad hitting George with the car. Wouldn't you think she would recall that she ditched this kid she went out on a date with, Marty, to hook up with George? But let's set Lorraine aside completely, because the real relationship is between George and Marty. And from what we can tell, George didn't have any friends at all until Marty showed up. Wouldn't you remember your first friend, not only your first friend, but the guy who taught you how to be confident, how to get the girl, how to fight for the girl? And even at the end there in 1955, he says to him, he's like,
I want to thank you for all your good advice. I'll never forget it.
When you think you would remember Marty, Bob Gale came back and said, if you look through a yearbook, you may see kids who look like a particular kid. You wouldn't automatically assume that, it's your son sitting in front of you. But you also have to remember that Marty was only there for a week and his parents didn't see him every day. So maybe he didn't have that much of an impact. But I would say that it's not about time, it's about memories. And especially with George, the relationship that he had with George, I would think that he would at least remember a Marty. If we look at the end of the movie, they credit Biff.
If it wasn't for him,
We never would have fallen in love.
that's right.
Well, who set all that up? It wasn't Biff.
This might be an opportunity to talk about Mandela effect. Do you think that could be a bit of an explanation away for this?
I don't think that it was meant to be that way. I think it was just kind of like
An oversight.
yeah, I just posed this revised breakfast scene where everybody gets together, and maybe Lorraine is telling the story of how her and George got together. Maybe we go back to that. And she's like, remember that Marty? Like, I wonder what he's up to now. And you actually see Marty like panic. It's the same face he had when he's at dinner with Lorraine and her parents back in 1955, and he talks about a rerun. He's like, oh shit, like they don't know what a rerun is because this Jackie Gleason shit's all brand new.
It's a rerun.
You'll find out.
Maybe he has that moment of panic and Lorraine sees it and she says, I know, you've heard this story 1,000 times. I'll stop. And Marty's like, no, it's not that. It's not that. She's like, no, I get it. And George is like, yeah, I wonder whatever happened to Marty. Maybe you have Marty say, I suspect that wherever he is, he's probably doing just fine. It's just some kind of recognition that there was a Marty. I'm not necessarily saying that it has to be, hey, you look like this guy from 1955, from 30 years ago. I'm not saying that. But when you have a line where you're like, if it wasn't for Biff, we would have never gotten together. It's like, no, Biff is like a fourth of why you got together. Okay. So let's give credit where credit's due. Why do you both have this memory that it was Biff? Well, that's my only thing for now. Do you have a thing? Let us know in the comments below. And remember,
Roads? But we don't need roads.